Yeah, that's a heavy spaceship.
That's a real problem if it hits.
The Object 3I Atlas keeps surprising scientists. It might not even be a comet at all. Because it lacks the defining feature of any comet, it has no tail. Normally, when a comet approaches the sun, solar radiation heats its icy nucleus, causing the ice and dust to evaporate. Streams of sunlight push these gas particles away from the coma, stretching them into a long, glowing tail. However, this interstellar object shows no such tail. Recently obtained images clearly confirm this. Under normal conditions, the evaporation of volatile materials would make the tail visible, but no such effect has been observed. This means the earlier comet assumptions don't hold up. The nature of the object remains unclear, and all hypotheses are still on the table.
That's a heavy spaceship.
That's a real problem.
Jokes aside, the alien spacecraft version can neither be ruled out nor confirmed yet. On November 8th, new images of 3I Atlas showed a complex pattern of at least 7 narrow jets. These could be natural reactive outflows from multiple active surface regions, creating the appearance of jets pointing in many directions. Or we might be seeing 7 nozzles of some kind of craft, essentially the engines of an interstellar ship. We don't know for sure, but the multi-jet structure is confirmed specifically in the frames from November 8th. It's also worth noting a few other oddities of this object. After passing behind the sun, it became brighter and bluer. What's more, 3I Atlas shows non-gravitational acceleration, meaning that something other than gravity appears to be acting on it. Theoretical physicist Avi Loeb suggested several possible explanations. The object might contain very few volatile compounds, or its composition may include more heat-resistant materials. It's likely to be very strong and dense. He also emphasized that scientists should stay open to all possible interpretations and explanations of this mysterious space body. Elon Musk, in a recent podcast with Joe Rogan, said that if he had any proof of extraterrestrial life, he would have immediately shared it with Joe, implying that he currently has none. However, he found it intriguing that 3I Atlas appears to contain very little iron but an unusually high amount of nickel.
It'll be a very sort of heavy spaceship to make it all out of nickel.
And fucking huge. The size of Manhattan and all nickel? That's kind of nuts.
Yeah, that's a heavy spaceship.
Of course, Musk spoke hypothetically, adding that if such an object were ever to crash into Earth, it would cause a catastrophe on a continental scale. Maybe even worse.
What's really inside Area 51? UFOs, alien tech, and secrets too strange to believe until now. In the middle of the Nevada desert, surrounded by mountains and dry lake beds, there's a stretch of scorched land with no official purpose. For years, it didn't exist on any map, no signs, no flight paths above it. Even mentioning it was enough to raise eyebrows. This is where it all started, what would later become one of the most mysterious places in the world, Area 51. It began in the 1950s. The Cold War was heating up, and the United States needed a remote site to test its newest reconnaissance aircraft. The government zeroed in on a dried-up lake bed called Groom Lake. Isolated, flat, and with almost no civilians for miles, it was the perfect hiding spot. The base was established under the name Paradise Ranch to attract workers, but there was nothing paradise-like about it. Just dust, secrecy, and fences that led to more fences. Officially, the base didn't exist until 2013. Yes, that recently. Before that, every photo was classified and every record blacked out. Even pilots flying nearby were told to avoid the airspace, which was marked as restricted with no explanation. If they flew over it, they risked being intercepted by fighter jets. This place wasn't just top secret, it was invisible. A base built from the shadows, in the shadows. But as spy planes started flying and strange shapes began lighting up the desert skies, rumors took flight too. That's where the mystery deepens, and that's where we're going next. To understand why Area 51 became so secretive, you have to look at what was flying above it. In the early days, this base wasn't a hideout for alien technology. It was a launch pad for some of the most advanced spy planes the world had ever seen. In the 1950s, the United States was desperate to spy on the Soviet Union without getting caught. Satellites didn't exist yet, so they needed something that could fly higher than any radar could reach. That's where the U-2 came in. It was long, thin, and fragile looking, but it could soar over 70,000 feet up, high enough to see Soviet missile sites without being detected. At least that was the plan. The U-2 was built in total secrecy, and it needed a test site just as hidden. Lockheed's Skunk Works team, led by legendary engineer Kelly Johnson, picked Groom Lake. They flew parts in undercover, used coded language, and made sure even workers didn't know what they were building until it was done. The first flight of the U-2 happened here. No one outside the project had a clue, but the U-2 wasn't enough. As Soviet radar improved, the United States needed something faster, much faster. Enter the SR-71 Blackbird. Sleek, jet black, and capable of flying over 3 times the speed of sound, it looked like something out of a sci-fi film. In fact, if someone saw it streaking across the sky, it's easy to understand why they'd think it was extraterrestrial. The SR-71 flew so fast and so high, no missile could catch it, and it was tested once again in the shadows of Area 51. These aircraft were years ahead of their time, some say even decades. And because of how secret they were, the public never got an explanation for the strange lights in the sky or the sonic booms echoing across the desert. People started talking. UFO rumors were born not from fiction but from real machines that weren't supposed to exist. Area 51 wasn't just hiding planes, it was hiding progress. And as the Cold War continued, what flew over Groom Lake only got weirder, faster, and harder to explain. Beneath the veil of all those aircraft tests was the land itself, Groom Lake. A bone-dry, ancient lake bed in the middle of nowhere, it became the perfect blank canvas for a hidden world to rise. From above, it looks empty, but in reality, it's anything but. Over the years, the facility at Groom Lake expanded in ways that were never publicly documented. Massive hangars appeared, runways longer than commercial airports were built, roads, sensors, fuel depots, housing units, an entire infrastructure designed for something far more advanced than simple air testing. What began as a few tents and a strip of asphalt gradually turned into a self-contained base that could operate off the grid, away from satellites, reporters, or even most of the United States government. Workers were flown in on unmarked planes, and deliveries came at night. Even the trucks bringing in equipment were sometimes covered and escorted. Many believe some of these hangars go underground, deep enough to escape drone surveillance and potentially large enough to house more than just aircraft. Security at Groom Lake is notoriously tight. White SUVs with blacked-out windows patrol the surrounding hills. Sensors are embedded in the sand. Trespassers don't get warnings. They're met with military-style commands and fines that make sure they never try again. And still, no official blueprints of the base exist in the public domain. What's known comes from satellite images, rare whistleblowers, and occasional slips in government documents. But perhaps the strangest part isn't what's above ground, it's what might lie beneath it. Some satellite scans show heat signatures inconsistent with normal buildings. Others have spotted strange vehicle tracks that vanish at certain points, as if the roads continue underground. It's led to endless theories, labs, storage vaults, or hidden tunnels leading even deeper into the desert. And it's here, at Groom Lake, where one of the most controversial stories about Area 51 begins, one that brought the word alien into every conversation about the base. In 1989, a man named Bob Lazar appeared on television under a shadowed silhouette and changed the way the world viewed Area 51 forever. He claimed to have worked not directly at the base itself, but at a nearby facility called S4, hidden within the Papoose Mountains. According to him, S4 was part of a classified program focused on reverse engineering technology. Technology, he said, wasn't built by humans. Lazar described working on a sleek metallic disc, one of 9 stored at the facility. He didn't call it a prototype or a captured jet. He said plainly that it was not from this Earth. The craft supposedly used a form of propulsion that manipulated gravity, bending space in a way our physics didn't account for. His descriptions went further. The spacecraft had no visible seams, no bolts, no wiring. The inside was cramped and the seats were unusually small, far too small for the average adult human. Lazar believed the technology wasn't just advanced, it was designed by beings unlike us. He never claimed to meet these beings, but hinted that others on the project might have been briefed on their origin. The implication was clear. This was alien technology, possibly recovered from an earlier crash. Skeptics were quick to point out holes in his story, missing school records, unverifiable employment history. But there were strange consistencies too. He correctly described certain details about unmarked aircraft flights over Groom Lake before they were publicly acknowledged. His knowledge of the base's layout, access routes, and flight schedules was oddly accurate. Even some former workers later admitted that parts of his story lined up with real protocols used during highly classified work. Most mainstream scientists remain cautious. There's no concrete proof of alien craft, no photos, no official documents. But Lazar's claims have stayed in public consciousness for decades, partly because he didn't seem to seek fame, and partly because parts of his story feel just plausible enough. And if what he said is even partially true, it suggests that Area 51 isn't just about secret aircraft. It could be the center of something much bigger. The next question naturally follows. If the government really did recover a craft not built on Earth, where did it come from? Some believe the answer lies in one of the most controversial incidents in UFO history. Let's go back to 1947. Let's talk about Roswell. In July 1947, something strange crashed near Roswell, New Mexico. At first, the US military publicly announced it had recovered a flying disc. That headline ran in local newspapers, setting off immediate interest. But within a day, officials changed their story, claiming it was just a weather balloon. The original press release was called a mistake, and the debris was quickly flown away to unknown locations. To many, that sudden reversal didn't sit right, and over time, Roswell became the center of countless theories. The official explanation much later was that the wreckage belonged to Project Mogul, a top-secret balloon designed to detect Soviet nuclear tests. That's possible. But then, why the secrecy? Why the armed guards? Why did witnesses, including ranchers and even some military personnel, describe materials that couldn't be burned, bent, or broken? Some even claim to have seen small humanoid bodies quickly taken away under military escort. Here's where Area 51 enters the picture. Though the crash site was hundreds of miles away, researchers believe the recovered debris, whatever it truly was transferred to Nevada for further study. At the time, the base at Groom Lake didn't exist publicly. That made it the perfect location to quietly store, examine, and potentially reconstruct something extraordinary. Over the decades, declassified documents have confirmed that Roswell was linked to real covert operations. Still, no document mentions UFOs or extraterrestrials. And yet, whistleblowers and anonymous sources continue to insist that something was indeed recovered, something the government couldn't explain. If those claims hold even a fraction of truth, it's not hard to see why Area 51 became the place most likely to hide the wreckage. Roswell wasn't just a strange moment in history, it laid the foundation for nearly every modern UFO conspiracy. And while the incident itself is still debated, what followed it was even more bizarre. Years of sightings over military bases, strange shapes in the sky, and witness accounts that suggest Roswell wasn't an isolated event. Since the 1950s, reports of disc-shaped objects flying above and around Area 51 have been surprisingly consistent. Locals, private pilots, and even base contractors have described glowing crafts darting silently through the sky, moving in ways no conventional aircraft could. Sharp turns without slowing down, hovering completely still, then vanishing without sound. These weren't just rumors passed around campfires. Some of these sightings came from trained observers and technical staff. One retired radar technician claimed his instruments picked up returns moving faster than any known plane, with no transponders and no heat trails. Another contractor working near Groom Lake told journalists that on some nights you could see discs lifting off vertically, changing direction mid-air with zero aerodynamic drag. Of course, these accounts are hard to verify. But when you hear the same types of stories over the span of decades from unrelated people with nothing to gain, it starts to raise questions. Some explanations point to secret flight testing. That's very likely. But there are details in some sightings that don't quite match anything man-made. No exhaust, no visible propulsion, no wings. A few former insiders, speaking anonymously, have gone further. They claim at least one of these discs wasn't built by the US, or by any other country on Earth. They speak of recovered technology, partially functional, being test-flown in remote sectors of the base. Even Bob Lazar's account mentions regular test flights of a gravity-based craft from inside a hangar camouflaged into the mountainside. Whether these objects are prototypes of future weapons or something more, the secrecy surrounding them is what feeds the mystery. Why not just say they're drones? Why the silence, the lockdowns, and the threats to anyone caught filming? If these crafts are real and under active testing, then someone somewhere is flying machines the world hasn't even begun to understand. And if they're not, why are they being seen again and again over a place that officially doesn't allow such sightings to exist? If you head to a certain terminal at Harry Reid International Airport in Las Vegas, you'll find a plain white building with no logos and no signs. Outside there are several small passenger jets painted white with a single red stripe. They don't carry any markings, no airline names, and no publicly available schedules. Yet they take off and land like clockwork, every weekday morning and evening. These are the Janet flights, and their only job is to shuttle employees to and from places like Area 51. The name Janet doesn't appear in any official airline directory. It's a call sign, used in radio transmissions. Some speculate it stands for just another non-existent terminal, though no one's confirmed it. The planes themselves are operated under contract with the US Air Force, and their exact destinations are blacked out from flight trackers the moment they leave Las Vegas. Workers board with security badges, and once the doors close, that's the last anyone sees until the planes vanish into restricted airspace. Passengers are likely engineers, intelligence analysts, project managers, people involved in black-budget defense work. Once in the air, they head toward Groom Lake and other classified testing areas. It's the only airline in the US where boarding requires government clearance and where destinations are hidden under code names. The secrecy isn't just for protection, it's about separation. Employees working on top-tier projects are expected to leave everything behind when they board. No phones, no personal items, no questions asked. This degree of control and isolation is rarely seen outside of intelligence operations. Janet flights have never been officially acknowledged by the Department of Defense in detail, but their existence is obvious, photographed daily by civilian aviation watchers. The mystery lies not in whether they're real, but what they're transporting. Whatever's happening at Area 51 and nearby sites, it's considered important enough to operate a private airline with more security than some international airports. And that brings up even stranger possibilities about what's going on behind those fences. Area 51 has always been tied to advanced aircraft, but some of the claims connected to the base go far beyond jets and radar systems. Over the years, whispers have grown louder about more experimental programs, ones that stretch into areas like atmospheric manipulation and psychological control. The concept of weather modification isn't science fiction. In fact, during the Vietnam War, the US military used cloud seeding in Operation Popeye to extend the monsoon season. That was real. So it's not a leap to consider that such ideas may have evolved in the decades since. Some researchers believe that remote bases like Area 51 would be ideal environments for testing directed energy systems or weather-related experiments, far from public scrutiny and under total environmental control. There are also persistent claims, especially from ex-military personnel, that certain sections of the base were involved in researching how electromagnetic fields might influence the human brain. While much of this sounds like science fiction, declassified documents from past programs like MKUltra reveal that the government has tested such concepts before. So even if these experiments didn't start at Area 51, it's not unreasonable to consider that they may have been continued there, away from public records. Reports from some former workers mention entire buildings where access was restricted even to those with high clearance. Inside, according to a few anonymous sources, were strange chambers, electromagnetic isolation rooms, and experimental arrays designed to disrupt electronic signals, or possibly even brainwave patterns. Again, none of this is confirmed, but the consistency of these stories across multiple decades and witnesses is enough to raise eyebrows. What's compelling isn't just the theories themselves, but how tightly they're wrapped in secrecy. If there's nothing unusual happening, why hide the data so aggressively? Why allow public myths to grow unchecked? Maybe it's intentional. Maybe feeding wild speculation is safer than releasing the truth. Because while alien stories capture headlines, it might be the human-made tech that's more dangerous, and more real. While Area 51 gets most of the attention, it's not the only mysterious location hidden in the Nevada desert. In fact, it might not even be the most secretive. Roughly 70 miles northwest of Groom Lake lies another high-security military zone known as the Tonopah Test Range. Some people call it Area 52. It's used for testing drones, advanced weapons, and classified systems, but unlike Area 51, it's rarely mentioned in media or public records. Some researchers believe that the really sensitive projects may have shifted here over time, as attention to Area 51 grew too loud. Tonopah is surrounded by even more restricted airspace than Groom Lake, and satellite images show an expanding network of hangars, runways, and underground-looking structures. The entire area is heavily guarded, and entry is nearly impossible without military clearance. Unlike Groom Lake, There are fewer civilian reports of sightings or strange phenomena here, likely because it's even more cut off from roads and observation points. That silence only fuels speculation that the work being done at Tonopah may be more advanced than what the public assumes. Then there's Dugway Proving Ground in Utah, which has been described by some insiders as Area 51's chemical cousin. It's where the military tests biological agents, advanced detection systems, and possibly even containment technologies. Unlike Groom Lake, Dugway has confirmed links to chemical and biological defense programs. That adds another layer of mystery. If Area 51 is for flight systems, and Dugway is for biotesting, how many other bases are out there, each hiding a different branch of covert science? The vast Nevada Test and Training Range, which includes Area 51 and Tonopah, spans over 2.9 million acres. That's bigger than some U.S. states. Not all of it is used for air testing. Some sections are rumored to be dedicated to underground facilities, sensor networks, and next-gen surveillance tech. And the truth is, nobody outside those programs really knows how deep it all goes, literally or figuratively. For decades, the official line was that Area 51 didn't exist. That silence helped keep operations invisible, but it also made accountability nearly impossible. In the 1990s, that changed when a group of former workers filed a lawsuit against the US government. Their claim? That they had been exposed to hazardous materials while working at the base, and that the government was refusing to acknowledge their illnesses or even confirm their employment. These weren't wild conspiracy theorists, they were technicians, truck drivers, and contractors who said they had handled barrels of unknown substances, operated near burning pits filled with strange waste, and suffered unexplained health issues years later. But because the government refused to officially admit that Area 51 was real, the workers couldn't even prove where they had been employed. Their medical cases were stuck in limbo. In 1995, the Clinton administration signed an executive order exempting the Air Force's operating location near Groom Lake, Nevada from environmental disclosure laws. That wording, without ever naming Area 51, was the first public hint that the base was real. The reason for the exemption? National security. But critics argued it was just a way to avoid court rulings that would have forced officials to admit to the dumping of toxic materials. Journalists and watchdog groups tried to investigate, but nearly every request was blocked under classification rules. Even today, much of what happened during that era remains locked away. The workers who came forward never saw compensation. Some passed away while still fighting for recognition. Their stories rarely make headlines, but they provide a rare, grounded look into the consequences of extreme secrecy. It's easy to focus on UFOs and alien tech, but sometimes the more troubling story is the human one. When secrecy goes so deep that even workers can't speak about what they were exposed to, it raises serious questions. Not just about what's being hidden, but about who's being protected. Because if these cases are just the tip of the iceberg, what else is buried under decades of classified silence? Decades after its existence was unofficially acknowledged, Area 51 remains shrouded in secrecy. In a world of leaks and satellites, this one patch of desert still hides something that even now, the public isn't allowed to understand. The question has shifted from what's inside to why don't we know? Sure, we've seen spy planes and heard about Cold War tech, but those are old programs, safe to reveal. What's never discussed are the current projects, the ones that require expanding hangars, deeper underground structures, and airspace so restricted that not even satellites catch details clearly. Construction continues, but no one explains why. Some believe what's hidden isn't just advanced aircraft, it's propulsion systems that break current physics, energy sources decades ahead of anything commercial, or maybe something recovered and still being studied. Others think it's about control, keeping revolutionary discoveries out of public hands until the time is right. Or perhaps forever. What makes Area 51 so unique is how successfully it hides in plain sight. The government doesn't deny it anymore, but it still refuses to talk. Every release is carefully limited, every rumor is left unconfirmed. The mystery isn't accidental, it's intentional. And that might be the greatest secret of all, not what they're hiding, but that they've convinced the world to stop expecting real answers. Astronauts saw things they couldn't explain. In June 1965, James McDivitt was piloting the Gemini 4 spacecraft, orbiting Earth at over 17,000 miles per hour. It was a mission focused on spacewalking and testing long-duration flight. But something else happened up there. Something he never forgot. During one of the orbits, McDivitt looked out the window and saw something strange. A bright object, metallic, cylindrical, floating outside. It had some kind of long arms or antennae sticking out. It wasn't space debris, it wasn't another satellite, and it was moving. He called over his fellow astronaut, Ed White, but before White could see it, the light changed, and the object was gone. They were alone again, or at least it seemed that way. McDivitt took photos. NASA got them. But when the images were released, they were blurry, unimpressive. The strange craft that McDivitt described wasn't in them, or maybe it was, buried somewhere in the film, altered, dismissed. NASA's explanation? Space debris, a reflection, a trick of the light. McDivitt never backed down from his sighting. He knew what he saw and he knew it wasn't normal. Years later he would say that it didn't look like anything he had ever seen before. And he was an Air Force test pilot. He had spent years in the skies training his eyes to recognize aircraft and celestial objects. This wasn't one of them. NASA moved on, never investigating further. The public moved on, distracted by bigger missions, bigger achievements. But the question lingers. If experienced astronauts can't explain what they saw, then who can? Some sightings happen in the blink of an eye. Others stretch into something more, something that lingers. Story Musgrave, a veteran astronaut with 6 space flights under his belt, didn't see a quick flash or a distant dot. He saw something moving, something alive. During one of his missions aboard the space shuttle, Musgrave reported seeing a long, white, snake-like object twisting and undulating in the vacuum of space. Not debris, not a piece of the shuttle breaking off. Something organic in its movement. It wasn't following a predictable path like a satellite or a spent rocket booster. It seemed to be swimming. Musgrave was no amateur. He was a scientist, a surgeon, a man trained to analyze and explain, but he never found a real answer. NASA chalked it up to ice particles, maybe a loose piece of insulation. But that explanation never fit quite right. Ice particles don't move like that. They don't coil and slither. And here's the eerie part. He wasn't the only one to see something like this. Other astronauts from both American and Russian space programs have spoken about strange, snake-like objects appearing outside their spacecraft. The kind of sighting that doesn't make it to the front pages. The kind of thing people dismiss because it shouldn't exist. But if it was just space debris, why did it move with intent? Why did it behave as if it was observing? If anyone else had said it, it might have been ignored, but this was a man who had spent nearly 1,300 hours in space. A man who knew the difference between floating junk and something else. And Musgrave's sighting was not the first time an astronaut reported something unusual moving alongside them. Years earlier, John Glenn had a different kind of encounter, one that NASA scrambled to explain. In 1962, John Glenn became the first American to orbit Earth. Alone in his tiny capsule, Friendship 7, he was focused, alert, completely immersed in the mission. Then, something unexpected happened. A glow. A swarm of tiny, shimmering lights surrounding his spacecraft. They flickered and pulsed, moving in ways that defied expectation. Hundreds of them, maybe more, drifting and dancing around the capsule. He called them fireflies. For minutes he watched them, confused but mesmerized. They didn't seem threatening. They didn't behave like ice particles, which would simply follow the motion of the spacecraft. They seemed independent, as if they had appeared for a reason. Glenn reported everything to Mission Control. On the ground, engineers scrambled for an answer. They needed an explanation, something ordinary, something technical. Later, NASA would say the fireflies were frozen condensation breaking away from the spacecraft. Tiny ice crystals reflecting sunlight, disturbed by Glenn's movements. A neat and tidy answer, maybe even a true one. But some weren't convinced, because Glenn wasn't the only astronaut to see them. Over the years, other space travelers described similar glowing, moving lights appearing outside their spacecraft. Each time, NASA gave the same answer, just ice, just reflections, just a trick of the light. But what if it wasn't? What if something was out there, watching? Something that appeared when it wanted to, choosing when to be seen. And as space missions continued, reports like Glenn's didn't stop. In fact, one of the most bizarre sightings came decades later, caught on camera during Space Shuttle mission STS-80, a sighting that NASA never quite explained. Space Shuttle missions were routine by the 1990s. Cameras captured everything, inside, outside, around the shuttle. Every movement, every anomaly was recorded. And in 1996, during mission STS-80, something appeared on camera that left experts and astronauts speechless. During the mission, astronauts on board the shuttle Columbia were filming Earth when strange circular objects appeared. These weren't specks of dust or camera glitches. They moved with purpose, entering the frame one by one, slowing down, changing direction. Then, in an eerie moment, they formed a loose formation, almost like they were aware of each other. The footage showed one object moving toward Earth's atmosphere, stopping suddenly, and hovering as if it was observing something below. Objects that behave like that don't exist in conventional spaceflight. Satellites don't stop mid-orbit. Space debris doesn't maneuver in unison. NASA never gave a clear answer. The official explanation suggested ice crystals, but the way these objects moved made that hard to believe. Ice crystals don't halt, change speed, and float in patterns. Whatever was in that footage wasn't behaving like debris. The video became one of the most compelling pieces of NASA-captured UFO evidence. Experts debated its meaning for years, but no one could provide an explanation that made sense. The STS-80 footage remains an unsettling glimpse into something unknown, something watching. And yet, STS-80 wasn't the only space shuttle mission where strange things were caught on camera. Just a year before, during STS-75, something even more bizarre happened. It started as a simple experiment. The crew of STS-75 deployed a long, thin tether into space, nearly 12 miles of conductive cable stretching out from the shuttle. It was meant to test electricity generation in orbit, but what happened next shocked everyone watching. The tether broke. Instead of functioning as planned, it drifted loose, floating away from the shuttle. NASA was disappointed, but the real story began when cameras zoomed in on the escaping tether. Dozens, maybe even hundreds of strange glowing objects began appearing around it, circular, pulsating, and massive compared to the tether itself. They drifted in, moving in ways that didn't match space debris. Some had holes in their centers like classic flying saucers. They didn't just pass by, they seemed drawn to the tether, clustering around it, almost inspecting it. Millions watched the footage live. When NASA realized what was being broadcasted, they quickly dismissed it. Ice particles, debris, out-of-focus camera distortions, anything but something unexplained. But the video showed otherwise. The objects were moving independently, shifting directions, acting as if they were under intelligent control. Debunkers tried to explain it away, but no explanation fully accounted for the sheer number of objects, their size, their synchronized movements. To this day, the STS-75 tether footage remains one of the most jaw-dropping UFO encounters ever captured in space. But unexplained encounters didn't start with shuttle missions. One of the earliest astronaut UFO sightings happened decades earlier, and it came from a man who had nothing to gain by lying. Gordon Cooper saw something up close, something that should have never been there. Gordon Cooper wasn't just any astronaut. He was one of NASA's first, the Mercury 7, America's space pioneers. He was a combat pilot, a man trusted with national secrets, someone who didn't deal in fantasy. When he said he saw a UFO, people listened. His first encounter happened years before he went to space. While stationed at Edwards Air Force Base in the 1950s, Cooper and his team witnessed a flying saucer land right in front of them. They filmed it, reported it, and handed the footage over to higher-ups. It was never seen again. But Cooper's most famous UFO story happened in orbit. During his Mercury Atlas 9 mission in 1963, something strange appeared outside his capsule. A glowing greenish object moving at incredible speeds. It wasn't a satellite, it wasn't space debris. Radar operators on the ground confirmed they were tracking it, meaning it wasn't just an optical illusion. Cooper radioed the sighting to NASA, but when he landed, something changed. Reporters weren't allowed to ask about it. Official transcripts omitted any mention of the UFO, and Cooper was told never to discuss it publicly. Years later, he broke his silence. He openly spoke about UFOs, about the things he saw, about the government's refusal to acknowledge the truth. He was convinced that extraterrestrial intelligence was real, that it had been here, that it had been watching. Leroy Chiao was no stranger to space. As commander of Expedition 10 aboard the International Space Station, he had spent months in orbit, staring out into the endless blackness, watching Earth drift below. But one day, something appeared that defied explanation. It happened during a spacewalk. Chiao was outside the ISS, floating hundreds of miles above the planet, performing routine maintenance. His attention was focused, his mind locked on the task at hand. Then, out of nowhere, something caught his eye. A row of lights, bright, evenly spaced, moving in formation. Not a single object, but multiple, traveling together against the backdrop of Earth. They weren't following the usual paths of satellites. They weren't space debris tumbling in unpredictable motions. These lights moved with precision. Chow was stunned. He tried to make sense of what he was seeing. It was unlike anything he had encountered before. When he reported the sighting, explanations came fast. Fishing boats on Earth, city lights reflecting off the atmosphere. But something didn't sit right. The objects he saw weren't below him. They were out in space, moving independently. NASA didn't pursue it further. Like so many astronaut UFO sightings, it was brushed aside, rationalized, filed away. But Chow remained fascinated by what he had witnessed. He never claimed it was alien, but he never found a satisfying explanation either. It was another reminder that even in the most controlled, high-tech environments, things appear that can't be explained. And astronauts, trained to be the sharpest observers in human history, keep seeing them. Edgar Mitchell wasn't just another astronaut. He was a scientist, a decorated Navy officer, and one of only a handful of humans who had walked on the moon. But after his Apollo 14 mission, his focus shifted. Because Mitchell had learned something he couldn't ignore. He never personally saw a UFO in space, but what he did see was even more compelling. He met people deep inside military and intelligence circles who told him, off the record, that we were not alone. He claimed that extraterrestrials had been visiting Earth for a long time, that the government knew, and that the truth was being kept from the public. Mitchell wasn't just speculating. He spent years talking to high-level officials, including those who had worked at Roswell. He spoke with military officers who swore they had seen crashed crafts, dead extraterrestrial bodies, and technology so advanced it made modern aircraft look primitive. NASA distanced itself from Mitchell's claims, but that didn't stop him. He gave interviews, wrote books, and insisted that world governments had been suppressing knowledge of UFOs for decades. He even hinted that some astronauts had seen more than they were allowed to admit. And yet, Mitchell's words weren't completely unique. Across the world, in the heart of the Cold War, Soviet cosmonauts had been witnessing strange things of their own. But unlike in the West, their encounters were buried even deeper in secrecy. It wasn't just American astronauts who reported the unexplainable. Soviet cosmonauts had their own encounters that were just as baffling, just as mysterious, but even more heavily suppressed. One of the most famous cases came from Pavel Popovich, a highly respected Soviet cosmonaut. While flying a plane at high altitude in 1978, he and his crew saw a huge triangular craft following them. It wasn't a satellite, it wasn't a meteor, it moved with purpose. When he reported it, he was told to keep quiet. Then there was Vladimir Kovalyonok, a cosmonaut aboard the Salyut 6 space station in 1981. During his mission, he saw an object outside the station's window, a sphere, pulsating with energy, changing shapes as he watched. It was nothing like space debris. Before he could grab a camera, the object suddenly disappeared. Other Soviet cosmonauts hinted at strange encounters but were warned never to speak about them. The KGB had an entire department dedicated to UFO reports, but everything was locked away. Unlike in the US, where astronauts could at least hint at their experiences, in the Soviet Union, talking about UFOs could ruin a career. Or worse. For decades, these stories remained buried. It wasn't until the fall of the Soviet Union that some reports started leaking, showing that even in space, something was watching. And if astronauts and cosmonauts, some of the most highly trained and level-headed people on Earth, couldn't explain what they were seeing, then who could? Most people have never heard of Maurice Chatelain. He wasn't an astronaut, but he played a crucial role in early space missions. He was NASA's chief of communications during the Apollo program. A man with access to transmissions, signals, and classified conversations between astronauts and mission control. And what he later claimed shocked everyone who would listen. Chatelain stated that NASA had been aware of extraterrestrial activity in space for a long time. He claimed that every Apollo mission encountered UFOs at some point, but the information was buried, hidden behind classified documents and vague explanations. The real truth, he said, was that astronauts weren't alone out there. He even suggested that Apollo 11, the first mission to land on the moon, had seen something strange as soon as they arrived. The radio chatter was cut from public broadcasts, but according to Chatelain, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin reported visitors watching them from the rim of a crater. Large, glowing objects, just sitting there, observing. NASA dismissed Chatelain's claims, but he wasn't the only one hinting at strange encounters during Apollo 11. Buzz Aldrin himself would later speak about something unusual that followed them on the way to the moon. Buzz Aldrin was second only to Neil Armstrong in stepping onto the moon, but his most bizarre experience happened before they even landed. On their way to the lunar surface, Aldrin saw something strange outside the spacecraft, a shiny moving object, keeping pace with Apollo 11. At first he thought it might have been a spent rocket stage, drifting away from them. But when they contacted Mission Control, they were told the last known position of the rocket stage. It was over 6,000 miles away. Whatever was out there with them, it wasn't theirs. Aldrin and the crew debated whether to report it. Talking about UFOs wasn't exactly encouraged. They decided to mention it in vague terms, keeping it off official records. Years later, Aldrin would acknowledge the sighting publicly, stating that he wasn't sure what it was, only that it didn't belong to them. NASA's response? Reflections off the spacecraft windows. A common excuse one used time and time again when astronauts saw something that didn't fit the script. Apollo 11 made history, but their strange encounter on the way to the moon was never seriously investigated. And they weren't the only Apollo crew to experience something odd. Just 3 missions later, Apollo 14 had its own mysterious moment, one that happened over an open radio frequency. During the Apollo missions, astronauts had 2 types of communication: public transmissions, which the world could listen to, and private medical channels, reserved for conversations that weren't meant for the public ear. But during Apollo 14, something slipped through that wasn't supposed to be heard. A strange, whispered conversation between the crew surfaced, one discussing an unknown object they had spotted. The transmission was partially recorded before it was cut off. The words were brief but chilling. "We found the bogey, I still have it, yeah, it's looking at us." Then silence. The channel was switched. No further explanation was ever given. NASA never addressed it. The transcript remained buried for years. Officially, Apollo 14 had no encounters with unknown objects, but the transmission hinted at something else. Something seen, acknowledged, and then quickly hidden away. And the deeper one looks into Apollo-era records, the more strange moments like this begin to appear. Conversations cut off, unexplained lights, and accounts from astronauts who years later would admit that they had seen things they couldn't explain. Apollo 16 was meant to be a straightforward mission, another step in humanity's journey across the moon. But what astronauts captured on film during their time in orbit left behind one of the most debated pieces of Apollo footage ever recorded. While the Apollo 16 command module was circling the moon, a camera on board captured a mysterious object in space. It appeared to be a structured craft, metallic, reflecting sunlight. It hovered near the spacecraft, seemingly observing before slowly moving away. The footage showed an object that didn't match any known satellite, spacecraft, or natural lunar debris. NASA's explanation? They claimed it was the Apollo 16 lunar module's floodlight, a reflection of their own equipment. But many weren't convinced. The way the object moved, the way it held position and then slowly drifted away, didn't match a simple light reflection. Some researchers believe the footage shows an unknown craft, possibly something monitoring Apollo 16. The clip remained buried for years, only resurfacing when NASA released thousands of old Apollo tapes. To this day, no clear answer has been given. Was it just an optical illusion, or was Apollo 16 being watched? And if there was something out there, what did Apollo 11 see first? Because if Maurice Chatelain's claims were true, Neil Armstrong saw something even more disturbing. Officially, Neil Armstrong's first words from the moon were some of the most famous in history. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. But some believe another conversation took place. A private one. One that was never meant to reach the public. According to leaked reports and claims from intelligence insiders, Armstrong made an urgent, off-the-record transmission to NASA just after stepping onto the moon. In it, he described large objects watching them from the edge of a crater. The alleged transmission went something like this: "They're here. They're watching us. I tell you, there are other spacecraft here, lined up on the far side of the crater. They're watching us." NASA quickly cut the public feed, switching to a secret channel. Armstrong and Aldrin continued their mission, but according to some insiders, they were shaken. After their return, neither of them spoke about it publicly. NASA dismissed the claim as nothing more than conspiracy talk. No such transmission was ever confirmed, and Armstrong never publicly acknowledged it. But years later, other astronauts, including Edgar Mitchell, hinted that Apollo 11 had seen something unusual on the moon. If Armstrong really had a secret conversation that day, what was so important that it had to be hidden from the world? And why did NASA continue to deny astronaut encounters with unknown objects until whistleblowers started leaking footage? For decades, NASA kept tight control over the footage and communications from space missions. But no matter how hard they tried to contain the truth, some pieces slipped through. Former NASA contractors and employees have come forward over the years, claiming that certain videos were deliberately altered, hidden, or classified. One of the most well-known whistleblowers, Donna Hare, worked as a photo technician inside NASA. She claimed she saw doctored images, with strange objects edited out before public release. She wasn't alone. Another ex-NASA worker, Ken Johnston, alleged that Apollo astronauts had photographed strange objects on the moon, but were ordered to hand over all images, many of which were never seen again. Then there were the leaked live feeds, uncut transmissions from shuttle missions and the ISS, showing objects moving against all known physics before NASA abruptly cut the broadcast. Every time the response was the same: camera glitch, ice, reflections. But how many coincidences does it take before it stops being a coincidence? NASA whistleblowers insist that astronauts have encountered things they cannot explain, but that admitting to it could damage credibility, cause public panic, or worse, reveal that we are not alone. For decades, astronauts, our best trained eyes in space, have seen something watching, following, waiting. NASA denies, footage vanishes, voices are silenced, but the truth drifts just beyond reach, circling us in the dark. If they're out there, what do they want?
It all started in the English countryside. Perfectly symmetrical circles began appearing overnight in wheat fields. No tracks, no signs of entry, just giant, flawless patterns burned into the crop. The media exploded with headlines, alien landing sites, messages from other worlds, even secret military experiments. Some formations were so massive and intricate, they looked impossible to create without drones or satellite guidance. People were convinced. Books were written, documentaries aired, and UFO conventions had their new favorite subject. But here's the real twist: the mystery was cracked decades ago, and by the very people who started it. Two British men, Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley, came forward in the 1990s and revealed how they'd made dozens of crop circles using a rope, a plank of wood, and a pint of beer for inspiration. That's it. No lasers, no aliens, no government involvement. They even demonstrated their technique on camera, showing how two guys could create massive, complex shapes in just one night, all without leaving noticeable damage to the surrounding area. Since then, crop circle making has evolved into a full-blown art form. Some are commissioned, others are challenges between rival groups. Artists today use GPS, drones, and even roller measurement systems to produce stunning works in the middle of wheat fields, some of them taking less than a few hours to complete. And yes, a lot of these creators remain anonymous, which keeps the mystery alive for curious passersby and keeps online conspiracy forums buzzing. In the middle of California's hottest desert, massive rocks seem to move all by themselves. Not just a few inches, some left trails stretching hundreds of feet across the dry lake bed known as Racetrack Playa. No footprints, no wheel marks, just 700-pound stones gliding like ghosts across the cracked earth. For decades, people blamed everything from magnetic fields to aliens to psychic energy. It became one of nature's weirdest unsolved mysteries. Then a team of researchers finally caught the stones in action. Not by chance, they set up time-lapse cameras, GPS trackers, and waited for the right conditions. It wasn't UFOs, it was a rare combo of winter ice, shallow rain puddles, and light winds. The rocks didn't slide on dry dirt. Instead, thin sheets of ice formed under them overnight. When the sun warmed things up, the ice began to break and the stones gently drifted with the breeze, leaving their eerie trails behind. It only happens every few years and only under perfect conditions. That's why no one saw it for so long. But once it was filmed, the mystery cracked wide open. Still, if you stumble onto that playa on a hot summer day and see those long tracks in the sand, it still feels like nature's playing tricks on you. This one has everything: remote Russian mountains, a snowstorm, and 9 experienced hikers found dead under strange conditions. Their tent was cut open from the inside. Some had fled without shoes into the freezing cold. One had a crushed skull, another was missing her tongue, and others had serious internal injuries. For decades, the theories spiraled: secret weapons testing, KGB assassinations, even extraterrestrial encounters. The fact that Soviet authorities kept the case mostly under wraps only added fuel to the fire. But newer investigations, including avalanche simulations and trauma analysis, paint a far more grounded picture. The hikers had set up their tent on a slope cutting into the snowpack. A delayed slab avalanche likely struck while they were asleep, forcing them to escape into the blizzard with barely any clothing. Some were injured by the weight of the snow, others likely died trying to return in the brutal cold. As for the missing tongue and eyes, they weren't cut out. That's something scavengers do. Small animals and birds often target the softest tissues after a body is exposed for days. There was no evidence of violence or foul play. What really happened was a rare and deadly combination of natural forces, snow pressure, wind, darkness, disorientation, and deep cold. It wasn't a military experiment or a creature from folklore, it was nature, indifferent and unforgiving. So, back in 2001, rain in southern India turned red, not pale pink, but deep crimson, like something straight out of a horror movie. People were, well, absolutely terrified. Theories spread like wildfire, alien spores, meteorite fallout, secret military chemicals. Some folks even thought it was a biblical omen. Scientists rushed to take samples, but couldn't explain it right away, which honestly just made everyone even more panicked. The media all over the world jumped on the idea that extraterrestrial life was raining down on Earth. But the real culprit? Algae. Specifically Trinipolia annulata, which is this type of airborne spore that pops up in huge numbers during the monsoon season. These microscopic particles got mixed with the rainwater and, yeah, turned it red. The delay in figuring this out was mostly because of poor communication and, pretty limited lab testing back then. But once they did a proper genetic analysis, the answer was crystal clear. And interestingly, this kind of blood rain has happened elsewhere, even in Europe, for centuries. In ancient times, people saw it as a sign of war or divine punishment. But in reality, it's just nature showing off its weird side. The drama was all about the color, but behind it was just a quiet biological process, no aliens required. For centuries, Bermeja Island showed up on maps just off the northern coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. Spain, Britain, and even early US nautical charts marked it pretty clearly. It was always in the same spot, drawn the same way. But when modern researchers actually went looking for it, there was nothing. No landmass, no reef, not even an underwater plateau. Just open water. So how does an island just vanish without a trace? Well, turns out the answer isn't all that dramatic. Bermeja most likely never existed in the first place. Old maps were often copied from one another, mistakes and all. A misplaced blot of ink, a misreading of wave shadows, or maybe even a sailor's tall tale could stick a phantom island right onto a chart. Some people claim Bermeja was intentionally erased for political reasons to shift oil rights in the Gulf of Mexico. But after multiple sonar scans and satellite images, there's just nothing there. Mapmakers in the 1500s didn't have GPS. They trusted what they saw or what they thought they saw. And once something made it onto one map, it got copied onto dozens more. Bermeja is just one of many ghost islands from history. It didn't sink. Honestly, it never rose in the first place. In 1976, NASA's Viking 1 orbiter snapped a photo of a rocky formation in the Cydonia region of Mars that, well, pretty much blew everyone's minds. It looked exactly like a human face, eyes, nose, mouth, even a forehead. The tabloids went wild. Martian monuments, ancient alien civilizations, maybe even the ruins of a lost species staring up at us from across the solar system. But honestly, the truth is way more about lighting than life. That original photo was taken with a low-resolution camera, and the shadows from the setting sun just happened to fall in exactly the right way to make a rocky mesa look superhuman. Years later, when higher-resolution orbiters like Mars Global Surveyor and Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter flew over the same spot, they took new photos and the face was gone. What looked like eyes were really just depressions, and the whole shape was basically a lumpy hill. Our brains are just wired to spot patterns, especially faces. It's called pareidolia. We see faces in clouds, smiling electrical outlets, and, yep, even in Martian rocks. The face on Mars was never proof of aliens, just proof that shadows and timing can totally fool even the sharpest eyes. For years, terrifying stories popped up in newspapers and books people found burned to ash in their own homes, while nearby furniture and objects remained untouched. Some victims were reduced almost entirely to powder, with limbs left intact. There were no signs of struggle or fire damage beyond the body. The term spontaneous human combustion was born, and with it came endless speculation, internal fire, mysterious gas buildup, even paranormal causes. But science offers a far less supernatural yet equally strange explanation. It's called the wick effect. When someone is unconscious or immobile near an open flame, their clothing can ignite and the body's fat acts like candle wax. The clothes become the wick. The burn is slow and concentrated, which is why it doesn't spread far from the body. It explains the high level of destruction without affecting the surrounding room. Lab tests have even replicated the effect using pig tissue and fabric. Many alleged cases involved alcohol, smoking, or nearby fireplaces. It wasn't fire from within, it was a grim combination of heat, fat, and time. The results are disturbing, but not supernatural. It's not a mystery, just a misunderstood and rare fire phenomenon that's more about physics than horror. In the late 1960s, a serial killer calling himself Zodiac terrorized Northern California, taunting the public and police with cryptic letters, strange symbols, and puzzles no one could crack. One of his most famous messages, the 340-character cipher, remained unsolved for more than half a century. Amateur and professional code breakers tried everything: military encryption, language shifts, numeric substitution. Nothing worked. The cipher became as infamous as the killer himself. Then, in late 2020, a trio of code breakers, an American, an Australian, and a Belgian, finally cracked it using modern software and persistence. The solution revealed a disturbing but anticlimactic message. There were no clues to his identity, just taunts about enjoying the killing and not fearing death. It didn't offer closure, but it proved the cipher could be solved, and that Zodiac was more interested in attention than in complexity. The technique used involved transposition, the rearranging of letters in diagonal patterns. It wasn't mystical or unsolvable, it just needed computing power and time. The mystery of Zodiac's identity still stands, but one of his biggest puzzles is no longer part of the unknown. In the tiny village of Jatinga, nestled in the hills of northeast India, a strange phenomenon happens almost every year. During specific months, dozens of birds dive toward the ground at night, some crashing into trees, houses, even lampposts. Locals once believed evil spirits were forcing the birds to fall from the sky. It's been called a bird suicide ritual for decades and turned the village into a kind of dark tourism destination. But researchers have a much clearer explanation. The birds aren't committing suicide, they're disoriented. The event occurs only under precise conditions after heavy monsoon rain, during foggy evenings, and only in a very narrow stretch of land. Migratory birds flying through the area get confused by the low visibility and are drawn to man-made lights. Once near the village, they fly erratically and sometimes crash from sheer panic and exhaustion. Most of the birds involved aren't even local species, they're just passing through. The so-called suicides are really just tragic accidents caused by weather, geography, and artificial lights. Some efforts are already in place to reduce lighting during peak migration windows to prevent it. There's no dark curse in Jatinga, just a natural misunderstanding of flight, fog, and fear. So, starting in the 1990s, farmers in Puerto Rico began reporting a terrifying creature that was draining the blood from their goats, chickens, and livestock. The bodies were left behind, untouched except for a few puncture wounds, no mess, no meat missing. Witnesses described a reptilian beast with red glowing eyes and spikes running down its back. The legend spread fast across Latin America and into the southern United States. And the name chupacabra, or goatsucker, became infamous. But, years later, when actual animals were caught and examined, things changed. Most of the so-called chupacabras were mangy coyotes, foxes, or raccoons, suffering from severe skin infections and parasites. The illness stripped them of their fur, giving them a gaunt, almost alien look. Combine that with desperate, erratic behavior due to hunger and illness, and you get a perfect storm for myth-making. As for the blood-sucking, well, veterinary tests on livestock revealed that the animals weren't drained at all. It just looked that way due to internal bleeding and natural decomposition. The chupacabra panic wasn't driven by monsters, but by sick wildlife fear and, honestly, the power of a creepy story that spread faster than the facts ever could. Few modern myths are as widely known as the Bermuda Triangle, a stretch of ocean bounded by Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. For decades, it's been blamed for the disappearance of ships, planes, entire crews, some with no distress call, no wreckage, nothing. Wild theories have filled the void: underwater alien bases, time warps, rogue waves, even leftover tech from Atlantis. But when the actual data is reviewed, things get much less mysterious. Studies show the rate of disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle is no higher than any other heavily traveled part of the ocean. The region is prone to sudden storms, unpredictable currents, and has some of the deepest underwater trenches in the Atlantic, which makes finding wreckage difficult. Some of the most famous incidents, like Flight 19, involved pilot confusion, fuel shortage, and poor weather. Add to that the magnetic anomalies in the area, which can mess with compasses, and you have the ingredients for accidents. But the real reason the mystery stuck? Sensational books in the 1970s cherry-picked cases and ignored mundane explanations. The Bermuda Triangle sells, but under the surface it's just ocean, math, and weather. Shot in 1967 in the woods of Northern California, the Patterson-Gimlin film remains one of the most iconic and controversial pieces of footage ever captured. A large, hairy creature walks casually across a clearing, glancing over its shoulder before disappearing into the trees. For believers, it was the proof they'd been waiting for Bigfoot caught on camera, with muscles moving under fur, long arms, and a stride that didn't look human. But decades later, the cracks in the legend began to show. Costume experts have analyzed the footage and pointed out the telltale signs of a man in a suit. The proportions match up with a person wearing shoulder extensions and padded limbs. A man named Bob Hieronymus even came forward claiming he was the one in the costume, which he said was made from modified horsehide. Despite its popularity, the film has never held up under serious scrutiny. The original camera was shaky, the footage grainy, and no other evidence, no bones, no DNA, no verified sightings ever followed. It's a masterclass in how lighting, camera angle, and a bit of theater can turn an ordinary hoax into a pop culture legend. So, in the small town of Taos, New Mexico, there's this low, rumbling hum that's puzzled both residents and scientists for, honestly, decades now. Only a small percentage of people can actually hear it, and they usually describe it as the sound of a distant diesel engine idling, even though, yeah, there's nothing around. It's not coming from your phone, not from the fridge, and not from underground pipes either. It just sort of seems to come from nowhere. Some folks have even reported headaches, insomnia, and stress because of the noise. Cue the theories, right? Secret military bases, low-frequency weapons, alien transmissions, you name it. But after multiple investigations, including acoustic studies and medical reviews, no one's turned up any consistent external source. So what's the most likely explanation? Well, it's actually internal. In many cases, the Taos hum is probably a form of low-frequency tinnitus. That's when your brain, for whatever reason, amplifies internal noise. Others might be reacting to industrial sounds that are too low for microphones to pick up, but just barely within human hearing for a sensitive few. And hey, stress and suggestion can play a big role too. Once someone points it out, your brain starts searching for the sound and, well, amplifies whatever it finds. It's not really mass hallucination, but it's not a total mystery either. It's this rare combo of environmental factors and human biology. The hum is absolutely real to those who hear it, but it doesn't come from UFOs or underground bunkers. It comes from the human brain, basically trying to tune a frequency that isn't always there. Back in 1977, a radio telescope at Ohio State University picked up this powerful 72-second signal from deep space. It was so unusual that astronomer Jerry Eman circled it on the printout and wrote, "Wow" in the margin, and, well, that name stuck. The signal looked a lot like what researchers thought a transmission from an alien civilization might look like. No obvious earthly origin coming from the right part of the sky, and it wasn't immediately repeated. For decades, people hung on to it as possible proof that someone or something was trying to contact us. But then, in 2017, astronomer Antonio Paris came up with a pretty solid explanation. Around the time of the signal, two comets, 266P Christensen and P2008Y2, were hanging out in that region of space. Comets can emit hydrogen radio waves at exactly the same frequency the WOW signal was picked up on. The telescope back then didn't track comets, and honestly, the software filters were way more primitive than what we use today. Now, with more advanced instruments, we've ruled out most artificial or alien origins. The WOW signal is still fascinating, but all the evidence points to natural causes, not extraterrestrial messages. Turns out space is pretty noisy, and sometimes nature just throws a radio curveball our way. So, back in the 1800s, some really strange reports started coming out of a family crypt in Barbados. The Chase Vault, which was sealed with a heavy marble slab, would be opened for a burial only to reveal total chaos inside. The coffins that had been placed there earlier were no longer where they'd been. Some were overturned, others were piled on top of each other, even though the tomb had been sealed with mortar and showed no signs of disturbance from the outside. And get this, every time it was reopened, the same thing happened. No theft, no damage. Just coffins mysteriously tossed around. Theories kind of exploded everything from vengeful spirits to earthquakes to voodoo rituals. But when historians looked a little deeper, the answer was, well, a lot less spooky. The crypt was partially underground in an area that's prone to flooding and shifting ground. The coffins, which were made of heavy metal and sealed tightly, could actually float during flooding, then resettle in a jumbled mess once the water went down. The marble slab was so heavy and the crypt was opened so rarely that nobody would have noticed the minor structural issues underneath. Eventually, the authorities moved the bodies elsewhere and sealed the vault for good. The mystery faded, but, the story stuck. It's a perfect example of how something strange but totally explainable can become a legend just by being unexplained for long enough. When the Mary Celeste was found adrift in the Atlantic Ocean in 1872, the crew had vanished without a trace. The ship was intact, the cargo was untouched, the lifeboat was missing, but there were no signs of violence or distress. The captain's log stopped abruptly. It looked like the crew had simply vanished mid-meal. Writers and storytellers couldn't resist blaming pirates, sea monsters, time warps, and even alien abductions. But the real story is far more grounded. The cargo was 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol, highly flammable and prone to releasing fumes. Investigators now believe that some of those barrels leaked, causing the captain to fear a possible explosion. With no signs of a visible fire, but perhaps a loud bang or a sudden pressure release, the crew likely evacuated temporarily to the lifeboat, tying themselves to the ship with a rope in case things calmed down. But if that rope snapped and the sea got rough, they'd be left helpless, watching their ship drift away. The Mary Celeste kept sailing without them. The ship became legend, but the explanation doesn't need sea monsters, just panic, alcohol vapor, and bad luck at sea. In the early 1800s, the Bell family of Tennessee claimed they were under attack by a supernatural force. Strange voices, scratching noises, furniture moving by itself, and violent physical attacks were all blamed on a spirit known as the Bell Witch. The legend spread fast, with even future President Andrew Jackson reportedly intrigued by the case. For over a century, it's been called one of the most well-documented hauntings in American history. But when you cut through the ghost stories and look at the first-hand accounts, things start to shift. There's strong evidence that the activity was tied to family tensions, particularly between John Bell and one of his children. Some historians believe the haunting was a form of psychological trauma being acted out, possibly even staged by someone in the household. Others suggest it was simply mass hysteria, where suggestion and stress made the family interpret ordinary sounds as something sinister. No verified witnesses outside the family ever experienced the alleged attacks firsthand. And over time, the story grew, details were added, motives invented, voices given names. The Bell Witch wasn't a demon or a spirit. It was a mix of fear, local gossip, and a good ghost story that snowballed into Southern folklore. During World War II, a U.S. Navy blimp took off from San Francisco Bay on a routine patrol mission to search for enemy submarines. A few hours later, the airship L-8 drifted back over land and crashed gently into a residential area. But when rescuers arrived, they found something strange. The crew was gone. No sign of struggle, no parachutes missing, and the cabin door was unlocked. Equipment was still on board, and the blimp itself was barely damaged. It was like the two crewmen had simply vanished mid-flight. Theories took off. Some said they were abducted. Others claimed they discovered a secret and were silenced. But the real story is far more grounded and tragic. Investigators concluded that one or both of the crew members likely exited the cabin to inspect or adjust something, perhaps on the exterior structure while the blimp was flying low and slow. If one slipped or if both leaned too far while trying to fix an issue, they could have fallen overboard without the pilot inside having time to react. With no one at the controls, the blimp simply floated back to land on its own. The ghost blimp wasn't the work of secret forces, just an airborne accident that left more questions than answers in its wake. That's about it. What famous riddle do you have the answer to? Write in the comments, and don't forget to check out our other videos.